So the International Criminal Court has finally issued arrest warrants after 5 months of waiting for Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and Yoav Gallant, the former Defense Minister of Israel, who Ethan and Hila Klein famously called a good guy and a moderating voice. It took them so long, it's clear that there was something going on behind the scenes that was impeding them from just putting out the warrants in time. But yeah, so let's go over what this actually means, what the warrants actually say, what they actually decided. So firstly, the warrants are almost entirely centered around the deprivation of food and medical supplies. I find this very surprising, given that the breadth of crimes in the request for the arrest warrant was far greater than just that. But basically, all of this article is focused around that. And as I read on and on, I came to kind of realize that the reason why this is the case is because the prosecutor was a lazy bastard. So basically what happened is Israel challenged the jurisdiction of the court. The court found that it does have jurisdiction because even if Israel isn't a party to the ICC statute, its crimes have been committed in Palestine, which has accepted the jurisdiction of the court. And then Israel also challenged it on procedural grounds, claiming that they were not identified beforehand of the investigation, threw that out, saying that they already had an investigation going since 2021, which this was a part of, so it doesn't change anything. And then we get to the alleged crimes, and most of this is just focused on, as I said, the starvation and deprivation of medical supplies. One of the things here that is very interesting is the language that they use to describe this. Like here, the chamber found that there were reasonable grounds to believe that the lack of food, water, electricity, and fuel, and specific medical supplies created conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction of part of the civilian population in Gaza. Now that is language straight from the Genocide Convention. From Article 2, Stipulation C, any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. So basically, while this warrant does not actually include genocide charges because the prosecutor hasn't asked for them yet, I'm not entirely sure if the ICC prosecutor is allowed to tack on charges after the warrants are already issued. I know in normal courts you're allowed to do that. This is beyond the scope of what the prosecutor actually asked for. Basically, the court has, in no uncertain terms, said with that statement that there is reasonable grounds to believe that Israel has committed genocide in Gaza, because that is language straight out of the Genocide Convention. There is a ton in their decision based on the starvation and lack of medical supplies here. Another interesting thing is that they found that the fact that the USA issued their stern letter as an election stunt, demanding Israel to increase humanitarian aid, and then Israel did increase humanitarian aid for a limited time, actually backfired massively on the US and Israel, because that constitutes proof of intent. It shows that they could have increased humanitarian aid shipments whenever they wanted to, but they only did it in response to international pressure, which indicates that they were not doing it because they intended not to do it, because it was intentional that they were depriving Gaza of food and medical supplies. It says that here, the chamber also noted that decisions allowing or increasing humanitarian assistance into Gaza were often conditional. They were not made to fulfill Israel's obligations under the international humanitarian law or to ensure the civilian population in Gaza would be adequately supplied with goods in need. In fact, they were a response to the pressure of the international community or request by the United States of America. So, whoops, Biden, seems like you have sort of given the International Criminal Court grounds to assume that Israel was intentionally depriving Gaza of humanitarian aid by providing them with a counterfactual. Whoopsie, big mistake. I'll link the arrest warrant in the comments and the description here so you guys can check it out for yourself if you want. I'm not going to read over all of it. One of the worst things, it's not a great arrest warrant, and I think a big part of that is that the prosecutor was a big lazy bastard. The reason why I think that is quite simple. Despite the fact that this arrest warrant determines that the crime of persecution has likely occurred, persecution is like the third most severe international crime, in my opinion. There's genocide, extermination, then persecution. All of them carry the exact same sentence of 15 years to life. They say here the chamber also found reasonable grounds to believe that the aforementioned conduct deprived a significant portion of the civilian population in Gaza of their fundamental rights, including the right to life and health, and that the population was targeted based on political and/or national grounds. It therefore found that the crime against humanity of persecution was committed. And that's very good. However, there is a crime above that they also declined to emit arrest warrants for, which I find kind of weird. I don't think that the judges who are going to be judging the case should be able to decide what the prosecutor is allowed to present before the court. If the case for extermination is weak, maybe you can make it stronger later. Nonetheless, The chamber could not determine that all elements of the crime against humanity of extermination were met. However, the chamber did find that there were reasonable grounds to believe that the crime against humanity of murder was committed in relation to these victims. Now again, I'm not exactly sure on the workings of the ICC. I would hope the prosecutor still is going to have the opportunity to put these charges forth later and make his case for them better, but he clearly did not put forward a very strong case on those grounds because, I mean, you know, if he had presented, for example, a case as strong as South Africa's before the ICJ, there's no way they wouldn't have found, you know, that there was at least reasonable grounds to allow him to present that case before the court. And I think part of this is that the case just wasn't very complete. Because if you scroll down here, the judges are almost sort of complaining that they were given a lack of material. For example, they were only able to determine that Netanyahu and Gallant bear responsibility for the war crime of intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population of Gaza in 2 individual incidents. And that sort of indicates that the prosecutor chose to focus on a couple of like individual war crimes rather than making a really broad case for the big war crimes. So it's probably a miracle that they even allowed the persecution charge to go through, given what I see here as the incompetence of the prosecutor. Nonetheless, the fact that a warrant has been issued at all is an absolute miracle. After 5 months, you know, I was thinking they were going to find some sort of excuse not to allow it to go through. It is fairly weak, given how much more severe the crimes in Gaza are than what is actually stated here. But nonetheless, you know, these are the sorts of crimes that people get like 15 life sentences for anyway. So yeah, I mean, look, they're probably not going to get arrested unless they fuck up and travel to a country that will arrest them, which is probably not going to happen. I would say the main effect, practical effect of this is going to be that Gallant and Netanyahu will not be able to travel anywhere aside from the USA and Argentina because of Milei. The EU countries usually like to keep up appearances. I mean, the ICC is basically their court. It's in the Netherlands, right? So they would kind of look pretty bad if they like allowed them to travel to European countries, given they have an outstanding ICC arrest warrant. Arrest warrant. That's so cute. I can't believe I said that. ICC arrest warrant. I'm going to leave this in just to piss you all off. So yeah, I mean, it's about as good of news as we could have hoped. The allegations regarding the starvation and deprivation of humanitarian aid and stuff here are very strong. Like, very, very strong. Like, this goes far beyond just direct killing. For example, it says, by intentionally limiting or preventing medical supplies and medicine from getting into Gaza, the 2 individuals are also responsible for inflicting great suffering by means of inhumane acts on the persons in need of treatment. This amounts to the crime against humanity of other inhumane acts. They also ruled that Gallant and Netanyahu bear criminal responsibility for the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare. Basically, pretty much every part of the warrant was granted except extermination, which I believe was only not granted because the prosecutor failed to use the available evidence to form a strong enough case. But yeah, I don't really know where this will go from here. The ICC does not trial anyone. The ICC does not try anyone in absentia. They should, obviously. I don't know. You have an international court that has no enforcement power. It seems like you should allow yourselves to trial people who refuse to present themselves before the court. As far as I can find, the ICC does not trial anyone in absentia. They do it by video link and in the pre-trial chamber, I believe. They can do it at the confirmation of charges phase. They did it, for example, with Joseph Kony. God, what a blast from the past, huh? Kony 2012, holy shit. This article here notes that the ICC generally only confirms charges against people in absentia and does not actually try them. It's pretty common for people just to never be found or never be arrested, never be brought before the ICC. Out of 40 arrest warrants at the time of this article being written, only 21 of them had actually been executed. And those 19 people, some of them had the charges against them confirmed in absentia, but no trial actually took place in any of those cases. So there's not going to be a trial here. Let's be real. Let's be real. Who's going to arrest them? Who's going to bring them before the court? It's simply not going to happen. And it's just sad that they're not going to try anyone in absentia so that we can at least get the evidence and the facts laid down before an international court in a place where it simply can't be denied. Nonetheless, I mean, now we can just tell the Zionists, hey, your leaders are wanted for persecution. Your leaders are wanted for starvation. Point at dumb fucks like Lonerbox who claim there's no starvation in Gaza and ask him why he thinks is better than the International Criminal Court, his own liberal institution. So yeah, just wanted to make a quick video about that. Goodbye.